It's the morning of Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. Everybody is enjoying a normal day across the USA and the world. In the midst of this, 92 people board Flight 11 at Logan International Airport in Boston, MA. However, everyone's trip inside wouldn't end in Los Santos. It would end up being hijacked and flown into the World Trade Center in New York City. This wasn't just the only plane to be hijacked, as 3 other planes were taken over and crashed, one into the South Tower, one into the Pentagon, and one into a field in Pennsylvania. Soon after, the North and South Towers came crashing down, and Lower Manhattan was a wreck. The site was quickly evacuated. The event that had occurred was 9/11, one of the most tragic days in American history. The day where many people lost loved ones, a day where everything changed. This is the story of 9/11 and the impact it had around the globe.
September 11, 2001 was the day that 19 terrorists wreaked havoc over the American country. They carried this out by hijacking 4 commercial aircrafts. They strategically hijacked planes bound for California because the planes had a substantial amount of jet fuel. They took control of the planes with mainly box cutters. Then they flew the planes into important buildings in New York and Washington, D.C. Well, 3 of the 4 planes. One plane didn't reach its target due to the passengers and crew heroically resisting the hijackers. No matter, the attacks absolutely devastated the areas. Many people died, many others were wounded, and the news quickly spread around the country. There was nothing but grief, fear, and vulnerability in the days following the attacks. About 3,000 people died that tragic day, whether it was by being in a plane, being in the building, or just being in a close radius. Many families across the country lost loved ones. Other families didn't lose anyone, but were afraid of what was to come next. If anything, a group of evil men had a plan and it was successful. The terrorists won and America was capable of receiving destruction. The US government was also fearful, therefore they decided to find out who the culprits were. The terrorists couldn't just walk into America and cause a wreck. The FBI quickly found out that the hijackers were a part of Al-Qaeda, which was a terrorist organization from the Middle East. Osama bin Laden was found out to be the guy who masterminded the attacks on September 11, 2001. No matter if the attackers were from the Middle East, the USA, or Mars, Americans didn't care. They were hungry for revenge. The government agreed, and on September 14th, just 3 days after the tragedy, President Bush got permission from Congress to take military action. The USA and Europe found out that the terrorists were being aided by the Taliban, an evil government in Afghanistan. On October 7th, the USA began attacking the Taliban, and thus began the war in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, attacking Afghanistan just wasn't enough for some Americans. They began taking their anger out on Muslims and other people with Middle Eastern roots. As Al-Qaeda was a Muslim group, people obtained a stereotype that Muslims were evil. The recovery of the attacks were long and hard. The Pentagon was quickly repaired and functional again by late 2002. The part that was hit by the plane was being buffed at the time against bombs, which was helpful so the plane didn't cause a huge impact. Ground Zero was a tough cleanup though, as it took 17 months to clear the debris before the job was finally over. The job was not very safe, as the smoke, dust, and fumes caused lots of health problems for recovery workers. It would take 17 years before the last of the efforts were finally completed, as in 2018, the Cortlandt Street subway station would finally reopen again.
Few events of as much impact as 9/11, there was one ugly yet truthful statement. These guys just walked into an airport, boarded a plane. Not long after, they killed 3,000 innocent people. Something needed to change. Many laws relating to security were put into place. And for the first time, simple tasks now seem like they could be so dangerous. At any minute, some awful attack could happen that would kill thousands of people. One of the most impactful bills to be passed in the wake of the tragedy was the Patriot Act. Passed in October 2001, the act allowed the government and other authorities to closely monitor lost aspects of American life. They had more freedom to search homes, to access bank information, and even to tame people if they believed they posed a threat. It was a bold move, but there were lots of critics. The government was upping their security, but at what cost? The U.S. government would also create the Department of Homeland Security. This was passed in 2002 and was the department solely responsible for dealing with terrorism. They could more easily detect terrorist plans and respond to them. The act would begin a new era for the United States as a whole. A new era of foreign relations, a new era of knowing who to trust, a new era of vulnerability, a basic understanding that conventional rules of military involvement didn't apply exclusively anymore. From now on, the U.S. had to realize forward terrorism was a very real possibility. As the years pass, the change only becomes more apparent. At an airport, you have to go through the long line of security. You have to get your entire self checked. There are many items that are now forbidden on an airplane. There's just too much risk of it having another 9/11. But the biggest of all, and probably the worst news of all, was the fact that the United States wasn't invincible. Them, just like any other society that existed right then or back in history, always had an Achilles heel. For the U.S., it was the fact that the intelligence departments couldn't detect Al-Qaeda's plan. This is also spread to the rest of the globe. No matter how big of a world power you are, there is always a way to be stopped. This is an understanding that continues to live on. Many countries try to put an effort to stop tragedies, but they'll always be caught on something. Then a new law will be passed, and another tragedy will happen. It's a never-ending cycle that was brought to light in the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks.
It has now been over 22 years since the 9/11 terrorist attacks. But this event will still be talked about like it was yesterday. It was the day the unbeatable United States was beaten. A very thick shield was pierced. It showed that we need to not be so arrogant, since the United States, has been engulfed in a 20-year war in the Middle East. Osama bin Laden was killed in 2011. Airports have ramped up their security, doing their best to prevent another tragedy. Countries across the world have made it a goal to prevent terrorism. There has also been a rise in hate crimes towards Middle Eastern people. After all this, citizens and their political representatives still realize that a tragedy could strike at any moment. 9/11 was terrible, but it taught the world a valuable lesson. Something is never too secure.